Great job. Yes, always better than nothing. Always. Okay. Thank you, Brother Rod, and all who were getting started. Let's see, David, if you wouldn't mind passing these out. Let's take one. We are in Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. And if we could have two readers read for us, that would be fantastic. Verses 1 through 3 of Romans 12. There's two versions on your sheet, but you can feel free to read whichever version you would like. Sure.
I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. For I say that through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith.
Thanks.
Therefore I urge you, brother and sister, in view of God's mercy, to offer your body as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper way. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but to transform by the renewing of the mind. Then you will be able to test who God's will is. His good, pleasing, and perfect will. For by the grace given to you, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you.
All right, thank you. Okay, let's look at very quickly. On Sunday, Brother Aaron was giving us a lesson that was multi-layered. We'll just look at very surface layer of one of the things he was looking at in totality, which is more so of question 3. But before we get there, let's start just with explaining this. Let's say somebody just got here. They heard us read these two versions. Somebody explain to us, let's break it down in sections. What does the first section mean? Verses 1 and 2. Summarize it. You can use cross-reference verses, whatever you feel. Just someone raised their hand, let's say, and was like, hey, what does verses 1 and 2 mean? What would our response to them be if we had to explain that? If you have a study Bible, verse 1 of chapter 12 may be highlighted by the manufacturer of your Bible, because Romans 12 verse 1 is a very important verse. If you don't have that highlighted, I would suggest you underline it or highlight it. But this is a very important set of scripture. If you have not already flagged it, or if this is maybe one of the first times you've taken a look at it, this is very important. So let's say someone raised their hand, said, hey, verses 1 and 2, what does it mean? What will we say here? Time, and then you guys can answer. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. What does that mean? Say it again.
Christian living.
Okay, Christian living. Good. What else? Okay, we have to devote our whole body and ourselves to God. Ties into Christian living. What else?
Spiritual things.
Okay, put your mind onto spiritual things. Okay, good. What else?
Transcendence.
Okay, transcend. And we'll talk about that in a second. Good. Anyone else?
It's obeying the word.
Okay. Obeying the word. Anyone else?
We have to live a new way.
Okay, live a new way. All right. Anybody else?
There's a lot of things as Christians that we have to give up, make sacrifice for, because in the Old Testament they had sacrifice of animal. Christ came and he died, and we made that one sacrifice. So to follow him, we have to give up a lot of things at this moment. Focus on him, focus on spiritual things and not on the carnal things.
Okay. Good. If I forget some of the things you all said, don't be mad at me. Anybody else? Anybody? This verse 1 is very important, so.
It's like value of mercy and grace.
Okay.
Everything to glorify God.
Okay.
Transformation.
Okay, transformation. Good. That goes into living a new way, a new life. Okay. And any final ones? Any final ones that anyone can think of? All right, let's look at this in detail with everything that everyone mentioned. I'm going to reread it one more time, and then we'll kind of go into detail. I'm going to just do verse 1 first. I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. Much like reading comprehension in secular school, where you would have some sort of reading of a sentence of a chapter, and if you read a chapter or a book, you have a book report, and the teacher is going to say, hey, explain to me what happened in this sentence, paragraph, chapter, or in this book. That's what we're going to do with this first verse, because it's so important. We're going to break it down kind of piece by piece, right? So the first part is who's talking. Like, remember, if someone raised their hand, they don't know anything. They just walked in here, right? And we're reading Romans. Someone says, I don't know what that is. Let's just start establishing kind of what happens here. So author of Romans is who? Paul, okay? And what is Paul's occupation? What is he in the brotherhood? We would call him a what? Okay, an apostle, right? Okay, now, first, he's saying, I beseech you, right? Now we need to look at, we'll look at meaning, and then we'll look at context. What does beseech you mean? That's a old school word. Okay, so let's put beseech, urge, or beg, right? So that would be what in terms of level of strength? If someone said, I don't know, did they ask, did they beseech, or urge, or beg? What level of importance would you put this on if someone said, oh, Ellis said beseech, and someone said, what does that mean? They say, oh, urge or beg. So if I said, okay, so is he, how serious is he if he's urging or begging? What would we say? Okay, so then context would be, this is very important, right? This isn't like just when you get a chance, if you get around to it, it would be nice if you, right? Now, why is that a big deal? Because Paul has some writing that is like that. Remember, like there's in Corinthians when he's talking about marriage or not being married, he's saying that if it was up to him, he would say, you shouldn't get married because you should focus on doing things for the church. But he's saying that's not a command. That's just me giving my opinion. This don't fall into that because he's saying, I urge you, I beg you, I beseech you to do whatever we're about to read, right? So this is a much bigger deal than saying if as a preference. Someone say, okay, where should you live? Oh, if it was up to me, I like warm weather. I say you live in Florida, but the whole world can't live in Florida. So you should live wherever you can get a job and sustain yourself like that. But then someone may else say, oh, but I beseech you to eat healthy. That's way different than saying, hey, Ellis, where do you think people should live, right? It's way different. So he's basically saying, I beg, I urge, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by what is he giving this urging? By himself or from where? And say it again, it's from where, David? Okay, mercies. Mercies of God. What does that mean? That sounds like a little kind of weird kind of sentence. And the NIV says, in view of God's mercy. So that's interesting. This view of God's mercy. Basically, what's God's mercy? Someone say, hey, what does mercy mean? What would we say? Kind of just a summary. Mercy is what? Because there's a difference between grace and mercy, right? Mercy is you hear in the court system, right? Oh, judge, have mercy on me, right? Or somebody have mercy is basically you saying what? Okay, so I don't really want to get any wrath, right? So just give not really what I deserve, but kind of like, oh, I made a mistake, kind of leniency, right? Like I did a speeding, I was going 100, it's 55. Don't suspend my license, don't put me in jail, just I'll pay $200, just have mercy on my sentencing, right? So here we have this source as he's saying whatever he's about to tell us is very important. He's urging and he's begging, but he's not saying it from his authority. He's saying it from God, but it's not coming from God's wrath. It's coming from God's mercy or the view of God's mercy. It's not coming from his wrath. Why would that matter? Well, punishment of sin comes from God's wrath, right? We can see that throughout Old Testament and different cases in New Testament, Ananias and Sapphira, right? But this isn't coming from God's wrath. This is coming from his mercy. Okay, so Paul is saying he's begging the audience by the mercy of God that they do what with their physical body? What's the wording that he's using?
Like we supposed to put our whole self into what we do in this body.
Okay, let's step back 1 second before we get to that part and touch on what David said. David said offering, because he's basically saying, and there's very interesting wording in New King James, as a living sacrifice. Now, most sacrifices aren't alive, correct? Like when Abraham and his son went up and his son was asked to be the sacrifice, but then the angel stopped him and they got a ram. Did the ram, Abraham and the boy come back, or just the boy and Abraham? Right? Ram didn't come back because the ram died. Most sacrifices is dead, right? Basically, the sacrifice, you're giving up something, right? Like when you go to work and you get your check, you got to sacrifice fun to pay bills. If you were able to pay bills and have fun, there's an American saying that says what? That means you were able to have your cake and eat it too. But if I was able to maintain a cake and eat it, that would be magic. Now, when I eat a good cake, I wish that's what happened, right? Like when I eat pizza, I wish every slice is still there, but don't work that way, right? I got to eat it and it's gone. So I can't have the fun and responsibility. That's why the blessing is you get 2 checks a month, because usually 1 check whole go to responsibility, or no fun really with that. Just basically it's gone. And you just hoping maybe next check I don't have as many bills. So basically, usually a sacrifice is giving up something. So just keep that wording. Now we go into what Sister Ruby was saying. Basically, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Okay, we'll get into that in a second. As what way should it be presented? We'll write these words down. One is holy, and one is, say it again. This is interesting, right? Like acceptable not just to anyone's standards, but to God. New King James says, right? Holy, acceptable to God. NIV says, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. So either acceptable or pleasing, right? And then it gives us basically the climax of this verse, which is the last part, says, why should you present yourself a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God? The last few words in this verse, which is what? What's the reason behind what he's saying? Last few words in this verse says, okay, true. Let me take this. I'm underneath NIV. I'm going to put true, proper worship. And above, I'm going to write New King James says, your reasonable service. Okay, right? So we see that author is Paul. The meaning of whatever he's telling us is urging or begging. The context means this is very important. The source of what the authority he's using. The authority is coming from God, not himself, but not from the wrath of God. It's coming from God's mercy, or the view of God's mercy. He's talking to his audience, and he wants his audience to self-reflect, to look at oneself, and he wants them to present themselves as an offering, but a living sacrifice. Don't kill yourself, right? As a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable or pleasing to God. That's the standard in which your sacrifice, right? Think back to Cain and Abel. Two gave sacrifices. It wasn't that they didn't give a sacrifice. It was that one was what God accepted, one was what God rejected. And that's important. It's not that people aren't worshiping. It's not that people don't believe in God. But Jesus said they worship in vain. It's not that people aren't on a path, but Jesus is saying there's just two paths, and most people are on the path to destruction, right? So he's asking not to just give any kind of sacrifice, but a holy one that's acceptable or pleasing to God. And the reason behind this urging or this begging is because it is the audience's reasonable service or true and proper worship, right? So this is verse 1. I'm going to run out of space in a second. So let's look at verse 2 before we kind of dive deeper into this verse 1. Let's kind of do the same thing for verse 2. Now, some of these we can skip because we already know that the same author is talking, so we don't need to kind of go into that. So the next part is, next sentence, do not be conformed to this world, and NIV says conform. So let's look at meaning. What does conform mean?
Fashion ourselves or adapt to this whatever in the world.
Adapt.
Okay, adapt. What else? Conform, adapt. Those sound like big words. Let's say I'm just homeless on the street, or I have hardly any education. I don't know what adapt mean. I know what adopt mean. I don't know what adapt mean. Conform, what? Okay, follow, but kind of stronger than follow, though.
Don't get accustomed of what the world is.
Yeah, stronger, because a custom is more like Romans chapter 1, where it was saying all those sins, and it was like, yeah, you kind of turn a blind eye, but because you turn a blind eye, you accept it. This is more than turning a blind eye to wrong. This would be like, I see somebody killing somebody and I start killing them, right? I'm conformed to their behavior. Mean what? I adapt to their behavior. The gym, and David is working out hard, then I'm going to work out hard. If I go and he's not really working out, I'm going to adapt to how he's working out, right? Because I'm following his lead. But is more, even stronger than follow is what? Right? Summarize that, what I just said, in a word, basically, right? Conform, adapt, follow. Say it again. Say it one more time. Could hear you. Okay, superficial. Yep. What else? Okay, accept is a good one. Okay. And I'll put accept in yourself. So we know, like, it's not just mental acceptance, but it's also in your behavior. Right? Let's say we were taking bread is like this. Let's say you were making bread, right? And you had a square or you had a circle, right? Dough is like this, right? Pie is like this, right? It's not that whatever you make, oh goodness, the pie came in a circle shape. It's because what is the ingredient sitting in when it's in the oven? A circle pan. If you put that pie crust in a square pan, the pie gonna conform to whatever pan you put it in, right? Even though the ingredients are the same, visibly the shape would be different, and we would say that's a weird looking pie. Why? Because pies are round. Who told you that? Everyone. Every pie I see is round. This is a square pie. So we would look at it and say this pie conformed itself to what? What made that pie like that? Person say the same ingredients are in both. You say, well, I'm not talking about ingredients. I'm talking about what made the shape of the pie go from a circle, like what I was expecting, to a square. Oh, I put it in a square pan. Oh, then it conformed to its environment. It became a product of its environment. A pie can't make its environment be a product of itself, meaning the pie's ingredients aren't strong enough to bust out of the square pan and say, we got to be a circle, because it don't work like that. Same thing with your life. That's why Bible says bad company corrupts good morals, right? You not strong enough to bust out of your environment and be like, hey man, everyone act better. People laugh and say, what are you talking about? We doing what we want to do. You act like us. So that's what this is saying. So when we look at this, think of that imagery. The same blood and, quote unquote good person or bad person, and hair and eyes and legs and feet, toes, same. So we're not talking about the ingredients, but we say, where did that person come from? What circumstances? Then we say, okay, they were in jail, or they grew up without family, or they just came out from a war. They had bad traumatic experience. Then we say, oh, those life things are what made that person act the way they act, because life shaped them into the mold that we see, right? We say the same thing today, but we don't use this terminology of conforming. But you go talk to social workers or guidance counselors, and they'll tell you, yes, at the beginning of the year, your kid was good, but your kid conformed to the bad kids around him or her, and now they are now bad as well. Yes, that's why I'm saying it's way more than just follow, but it's actually changing, because the ingredients were all the same. It looked the same. It's that when it opened the oven and it came out, now you gave me a square pie. Now, if you give a square pie, even if you say, come on, look, taste the same. Some people say, I was thinking this circle, maybe something wrong with it. That's like a friend of mine. He don't like cupcakes, but he like cake. So I say, Erica put the same thing. It don't matter if a cupcake, same red velvet, she made a cake. It's in the cupcake. It's just she poured it in 6 little. He say, I don't know. Form factor. What is that? I don't like the way it looked. I want a slice. You giving me some round looking like a mini cake. I just want a slice of cake. To the point where he don't want to eat a cupcake because of the way it looks. Right? The way it looks. Now remember that when we get into this in a second, right? Okay, so we got this conform, and we say conform to what? And it's saying not to pans and cakes and all this nonsense, but says do not be conformed to what in verse 2?
Patterns.
Say it again.
Pattern.
And pattern of the world, right? So I'll put world there. Okay, and then the NIV, pattern of the world. or then this is just word. Okay, and that pattern will make a big deal in a second. Okay, and after this comma, but be what? Okay, transform. Both versions say that. Transform like Transformers, like the movie, or what?
Yes.
Okay, so we put change here. So we're talking about change on 2 levels. We'll get into that in a second. And be transformed into what? So we put to what again, because we got this conform. Now we got transform, and we put the renewing of your mind. And we'll get into that in a second. NIV says the same thing, and that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Now we kind of come back to here, right? A little bit. Because remember, he told us that the whole point of this first verse was because this was our reasonable service. But remember, we're presenting ourselves acceptable to God or pleasing to God. Then he tells us in verse 2, don't be conformed to the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you will prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God, right? So now when we get to verses 1 and 2 combined, we'll just put it over here. Verses 1 and 2 equals, right? Now let's look at this together. So somebody reread verses 1 and 2 one more time, and let's see what we got here.
I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God.
All right, thank you. Let's start at 2 and go backwards. 2 is basically saying, if you don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, if you do that, so if you don't be conformed, but instead you transform the renewing of your mind, you would prove to yourself and others what is the good and acceptable will of God. Now, people are going to ask, what is the will of God? What's God's will? Because people say that, but we don't really fully explain to people what that means. Meaning, someone may say, okay, I want to do the right thing, but how do I know what the right thing is? Right? That's a valid question. Somebody say, okay, I want to eat right. How do I know what eating right is? Right? I want to save money or have financial freedom. How do I know what the steps are? This is saying that if we do this thing, whatever this thing is, we'll describe in a second, then that will prove what is the good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. And NIV says you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. So same word. Okay, so you would basically be able to prove what's the good, acceptable, and perfect will of God, or I'll just put God's will. Now, we know from Timothy, Paul wrote this as well to Timothy, that the overall spiritual will of God for mankind is what? What did Paul say? We know that God desires what of all people in Timothy? But no, kind of explain it more like where somebody would kind of grasp it. He said, basically, he said to Timothy that it's God's desire that all men be what? Saved, right? So we know spiritually, this is what matters. Now, the reason why I say that is you may be going through bad things in your life from a physical standpoint, but you always have to understand that nothing in this world really matters if it's outside of salvation. Now, that don't minimize what you're going through, but bills don't really have anything to do with salvation, right? Cancer has nothing to do with salvation, but it doesn't mean it minimizes, okay, well, then I'm not going to care if I have cancer. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in order to really get your mind where it needs to be, some people put up here transformation, focus on spiritual, not flesh. I have to always look at my end goal. It's like if you're going through school, right? And let's say upper education, a master's, a lawyer, or a doctor program. Just you come home with 1A on one paper is exciting, but we need a degree, right? Like we working toward a degree, meaning if you got 1A but fail the rest, we can't be excited no more, right? We're looking for the end. Just like if you failed one paper, it don't mean you can't be a doctor, lawyer, have a master's degree, right? Just one paper. So we're looking at the total is salvation, right? Overall, God's desire is that all men be saved. That means that when we start talking about God's divine will, his goal is for every living person to come to the acceptance of salvation. Now, we may go different ways and paths to get there, but the end result should be salvation. Salvation is, go back to Genesis chapter 3. Mankind sinned, male and female, and the serpent was there. And basically God said, even though I'm upset, eventually I'm going to fix this, and there's going to be a seed, capital S, that will come and will fix what's broken. What was broken? God and man could not have interaction like they once did because light can't have communion with darkness, right? Can't coexist. So God's divine will is that all mankind could come back to his presence. That is eternal life, right? So salvation, eternal life, heaven, all these things wrapped up into this concept, right? So this is God's divine will. But how do we get there, right? This is where it gets into what some of the comments were saying. In order to get to salvation, we know that Jesus's blood is what's needed, but how do I get that blood? Someone say, oh, hey, we got a check for you. And first thing you need to ask is, how do I get that check? You shouldn't hang up and start spending money. You need to say, I need to get that check. First say, oh, I'm glad you asked, because you got to leave on a specific day, wear a specific thing, and come here and say a specific thing, then you get the check. If you skip those steps and just say, I want my check, you won't get your check because whoever called you had instructions on how to receive your money, right? That's how it works. When you have a job here, it's usually direct deposit or cash a check. You can't go to a lot of places anymore and give them a check. Like, oh, this is an income tax check. And Stop and Shop going to say, what is that? The groceries is 100, right? This is 200, so give me 100 back. Most places nowadays would be like, nah, because that could be a forged check, a fake check. You need to go somewhere and cash that check, get the benefits of that check, and then you be able to spend money here. Same thing. You got to cash into salvation, right? So it's there, but how do you accept it? That's where this verse is saying, right? Okay, it's there. It's God's will that all people accept it and able to receive it. But here's the steps. Jesus said, only way to get that salvation is through who? Through who? He said himself, right? Only way to come to the Father, he said, is through me. So now we got that way. Okay, we got it. Then we see from the Gospels all the way to Revelation, there's steps to acquire this free gift of salvation. First, you gotta, then we can go through those steps, right? I need to hear. Hold on 1 second. I need to hear. I need to believe. I need to confess. I need to repent. I need to be baptized. And I need to live a certain way, right? That's from gospel teaching of how I accept this salvation. That entire concept is tied into these two verses. That's why I said it's so important, because he said, if you do whatever this quote unquote thing is, then you will prove what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God, which we already cheated and knew the perfect, good, acceptable will of God is salvation. So we just went backwards to show what salvation was and how to obtain salvation, because that would be someone's next question. All right, Ruby, go ahead.
We have to have new ideas and new attitude, change everything that we used to be to come to being perfect and acceptable in the sight of God. Right.
You have to change what you used to do. Or if you were rude, can't be rude anymore. If you were mean and angry, can't be that way. If you were unloving, can't be that way. Galatians is a good place to go. It lists some things that you should stop doing, and it lists some fruits of the spirit that you're going to have to do. Right? First Peter is another one where it's saying you got to put on brotherly kindness and godliness and patience and love and mix all those things up into as an ingredient, and therefore you be able to live like a Christian should live. Right? So that's what that is saying. These two verses, we just went backwards. We explained it backwards. Right? We knew what God's divine will is, salvation. So how do we get salvation, which is eternal life, which is being with God in his presence? That means we need to put on light. First John says, how do you get light? If you walk in the light as he is in the light, then love of the Father is in you. Oh, that makes sense, right? So again, we're just weaving these verses together to make a holistic point of what this is saying. Now, we know those things in part, right? All those verses I was quoting, most of us here say, okay, I remember those verses, First John, First Peter, Timothy, all that. But these two verses are like very high level of saying what we were saying. Those verses we explained was, okay, I understand more what you're saying, like this column. But the high level is getting your mind to the next level. This is where most Christians check out, right? Most Christians will grab low level. They say low hanging fruit, right? You go to a tree and there's some fruit down here. Then people say, okay, this is in arm's reach, or I can hoist somebody up and we get that, and then done. Most people will die of hunger, and someone say, why y'all dying? There's fruit there. Oh, I can't. This is too high. I can't. You say, just climb a little bit more. There's so much fruit there. Same thing with spiritual things. Most people fall away because they don't go to the next level. Most people stop going to the gym because they don't go to the next level. People feel, okay, I got a membership and I went one time and they want to go to the mirror. No need to go to the mirror after one visit to the gym. You're going to look exactly the same. You got to do a lot more working out before you start seeing visible changes, right? So you have to put some work in, but most people feel like I went to church one time, man, I should be able to walk on water. It don't work that way. And this is showing us these two verses. So this is more high level, right? This is saying like you explaining these things, right? These concepts, but you got to move your mind somewhere in order to really get to that point, right? You got to move your mind somewhere. Those 5 steps, you moved your body and your mind, right? You heard, believe, repent, confess. You got baptized. You start coming to church more. You stop doing things you used to do. You know, you're doing that living the right way part. You're doing that, but you have to keep doing that as same concept of physical learning. Can't stay in kindergarten, right? You need to move on to 12th grade, to college, and keep learning. You should be learning every single day as a human being. You shouldn't stop learning. You shouldn't be like, oh, I don't want to learn anymore. Because that learning is how you transform your life. Meaning you could have been living a certain way and you learn some new information that changes your physical or financial situation for the rest of your life. So that's why learning is important. Spiritual is the same way. You might be living a certain way and then you learn something, Bible study, men's retreat, ladies retreat, camp, lectureship, and you say, oh my goodness, I never knew that. And even though a person sitting next to you say, what was the big deal? Oh, you didn't hear that? Same as school, right? Teacher teaching the 20-something kids, and most of them are, what's the big deal? And a couple of kids grab that information, open their mind up, put it inside, and lock it away. Same thing this is saying. Information is out there, but until you stop, verse 2, conforming to the world, and instead transform yourself by the renewing of your mind, your new mind. You renew your mind. Like someone say, okay, I renewed my vows, right? You don't get married and tomorrow need to renew your vows. I hope not. What happened last night? At least let some time go by before you need to, renew your vows. If a couple said we're renewing our vows, that means they're reminding themselves in the audience of the beginning. What was our goal? Oh, our goal is to be one. Okay, good. Now we're going to go and be better, right? Same thing. So if we stop being conformed to the world, changed by the world, but instead be changed to the renewing of our mind, change our mind, then we'll prove what is the good, acceptable, and perfect will of God, which is then we'll prove salvation. Now, there's a verse that talks about, don't you know your lives are going to judge what? The world. Why is the Bible saying that? Because God is going to say, before you say people couldn't do it, here are people that did it. Same thing as the gym. When you go to the gym and before you say, oh, this is too hard, they're going to have pictures and videos, or even themselves. They're going to lift their shirt and you're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you say before it's impossible, because people say it's impossible to do it. Yeah, hold on, look. And you say, oh, goodness, how you got that? Oh, look, I went through some steps. Same way, people say this is impossible. No way we're going to get from here to where you are. You glowing in light. Everyone in this line in darkness. Impossible. No, not impossible. Look how they got that. Because they walked in the light as he was in the light. He who? Jesus, right? So remember, people are going to say this is impossible, right? People in church say that. Some people walk away say this is impossible. I'm out of here. So this, whatever this is, first part of 2, which is don't conform, don't change to the world, instead change your mind. And we touched on this. Some people were talking about, focus on spiritual, don't follow the world, value of mercy and grace, blah, blah, blah. Do things to glorify God. If you do that, you'll prove salvation. That's the concept. Yes.
In Colossians 3, Colossians 3:7, it says, 7:7, 7:8, 9. In these you too once walked, then you were witness in them, but now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, the obscene tongue from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeking that you have put off your own self with practice 10, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. So, transforming the mind is putting away the old person, the old self. The things we used to do, we don't do it anymore. So we have to conform ourselves in these spiritual things. Yes, Psalm 119:11 say, I have stored up my word in my heart, that I might not sin again. Okay. So when we continue reading the word and studying the word and focusing as a child of God, as walk in the light, as he is in the light, it will become a habit. It's a pattern, it's a lifestyle. Christianity is a lifestyle. When you practice, you get perfect, you get mature. And that is what we should be seeking.
Yep, perfect. I put transition from man-like to Christ-like, because we know Christ is the image of the invisible God. So in order to be like God, you got to be like Christ, because he said the only way to get to the Father is through me, the Son. So we got to transition the way we operate from our entire being to being from man-like to Christ-like. Let's use one very specific example of that would be interaction, because if you have a study Bible, the first 2 verses will have a header, something to the effect of responsibilities towards God. But verse 3 has a header saying responsibility towards society. Right? One says responsibility towards God, one says responsibility towards society. People say, okay, you say God is love. Let's just use that. And we say 1 Corinthians 13, and we can go into all the things God is: love, what? Patient, kind, not boastful, these things. But let's talk about putting into practice. People say, no, what's love? How do you know what love is? Love is action. It's actually hard work, like going to the gym. The end result of the body, people like. because we look at magazines and movies, but we don't like to put in the work that that person did to get their body to look that way. Love is the same way. The end result, we like that, right? Wedding and all those, oh, this is nice, cute, it's happiness. But what about the work we don't want to put in? One way, one very specific way, someone say, okay, all you guys saying, I understand this, but how do I go from me to God, right? How do I go from transforming or this renewing is, let's use love as one example. We have to love the way God loves and not the way mankind loves. The way mankind loves. When you argue, so you said something or I said something, whatever, right? We both upset. Even one of us is upset. You just say we still have love for that person. But usually in dating or marriage, when two people argue, usually, now if you perfect or you acting more like God, you don't say how you do. But usually two people, are they going to call, text, email, or speak to each other? No. Right, because I'm upset. What does that mean? Then I'm not going to speak. That's how it works. No. That's how it works for who? Mankind, people. When you upset, why would I call someone tomorrow if I'm upset with them today, right? If I walk out here into this hotel and say, let's say somebody slaps you in the face today, would you call them tomorrow? People say, of course not. What study y'all having in there? That sounds like foolishness. But Jesus was on the cross saying, what? Father, what? Forgive them because what? They don't know what they're doing. So when the Bible says, don't let the sun go down on your wrath, we read that verse and say, okay, that's cute. But to married people, that's hard. Because if I'm upset with somebody, you basically saying, Ellis, stop being upset. Anyone upset and have somebody say, stop being upset? Do you stop being upset? Or do you be more upset? See, being upset is like being wet and someone say, be dry now. How? I'm wet already. I got to dry off. I got to cool off is the only way I'm going to stop being upset. Well, the sun about to go down. I can't help that. I was already upset too late. I can't be like that. That's impossible. People going to say, right? That's impossible. That's why in the church, when it says the older should teach the younger, younger people should see, oh, look at the love that these couples have. That's how church should be. Because remember, I wrote this before several times in the Bible study is when you look at, okay, the Godhead, each one give honor and praise to the other. Church should be a replication of what the Godhead is. So the world should know who God is by the church. And marriages should be a replication of what church is. Because each person is said in Ephesians in church have to be subject to one another. Just like in a marriage is said where husband and wife, same way. Men only want to say, oh, that means the women. But the verse before said already you should be subject to one another, meaning responsible for each other's souls. That was Paul's point to Corinthians. If y'all would have judged yourselves, remember we read that every Sunday, you wouldn't need a judge. If you had already judged yourselves before I wrote this, there would be no reason to write this if you were already subject to one another, right? So this is the flow, single to married to church to God, right? And we see, okay, look at how these things are showing love. It should be teachable. The problem is us, not the concept. So the concept is there, but the people don't want to do the work to implement the concept because it's too hard to do these two verses. Get my point? Not that you don't believe, right? When you see somebody with a nice body from the gym, it's not that you don't believe they exist. You can touch them and say, okay, look, oh, wow, that even feels nice. It's that I don't want to keep going 3-4 times a week for all year and stop eating ice cream and pizza and all these things to get that. That's what you basically saying. Same thing with this, because one way to get this is don't act like people act in relationships. Act like God would act in a relationship. And one good example of that is we say, okay, God hates divorce, but Jesus said in except for infidelity, but even in infidelity, God don't want you to have a divorce because there was an example he made called Hosea, right? And Hosea's wife was what profession? Prostitute, and he loved her so much, he would go out looking for her. Now, Most guys be like, what? No, let her be wherever she is. Because then say prostitute, not to be vulgar me, she's with another guy. Why would I go looking for somebody that's with somebody else? Right? Would it make any sense if we said you're going to pull somebody out of some bed and say, what? Come back to my bed? That don't make sense, right? God said what? That's how I feel. Every day I be waiting for y'all to wake up to come. So this is what real love. Most people say, that's way more work than I was thinking. I was thinking like wedding, and then we get a nice house and a fence. We get a dog, and we have 2 kids. Then maybe the kids want goldfish, and we go on vacation once a year. God's saying, yeah, those things are cute, but I'm talking about these hard work things. We say, no. Don't we have a way to get out of this? That's what they were saying. Remember to Moses, ain't no way to get out of this. We made bad choice. Well, God don't want. But just ask him. Maybe he will let us do something. So when Paul's saying, there may be some things that's lawful for you to do, but you shouldn't do them. That's where weaker Christians don't understand. It's like drinking and being drunk, right? You say, okay, what's that? No, it's a difference. It's not the same thing. But to some people can't drink. Not to all people. Why? Because some people drinking, they don't stop. They're going to get drunk, right? That's how it is. People saying, well, how much can I do before I get in trouble? That's how humans live. But God don't live that way. God is all or nothing, right? There won't be a little bit of God in hell when he just saying like, well, I'm just going to put some of me there and the rest will be in heaven. It's all or nothing. So if people ask you, or you ask yourself, how do I start making that transition? I always say this, because every person has some interaction with anybody, even if you're driving down the road. And are you going to react? Let's say you're in the right to what someone else did to you, how you naturally would as a human being, or renew to a new way and be like Hosea and go looking for his wife because that's my wife and I love her, right? That's how you show love, is over time. Even 2 people just meet, even if it's arranged marriage or you meet on Match.com or Tinder or something. Even you see the person, oh, I'm attracted to them. That's just today. You got to see me in 100 years. Then I ask. Someone say, oh, we didn't make 100 days. Okay, that's why. Same thing with the test analogy, right? Oh, I got an A. We happy for your A, but what about the 3-year program? Well, I can't stay in school for 3 years. I just was staying long enough to get an A. Now I'm out. That's why most people semester to semester drop out and the class gets smaller because people don't like to put in the work. That's the thing. So when you looking at this, these 2 verses, it sounded uplifting and encouraging to us. But when we start breaking it down, this is why I always say that we as Christians have to understand. The same people hearing this, to them, it may sound like work. It may not sound like blessings. To us, it sounds like blessings. I'm going to highlight this verse, and next time I'm down and out, I'm going to be encouraged. But to some people, they're going to say, you guys trying to trick me. You say, why? Because what you teaching sound a lot like work. And I came here, somebody told me this place will make me feel better. You say, yeah, it will. This place sounds like more work than out there in the world. I'd rather be miserable out there than to be doing all this hard work. That's why 1 Corinthians is so important, that the message of the cross to people who are lost is foolishness. They hear the same thing. But to those that believe, it's encouraging. So this is just one example of this transition, because most people won't let you get this deep in the Bible study. They're going to stop you when you start saying transforming or renewing of your mind and ask you, what are you talking about? I'm not a bad person. So you got to start explaining to them, how do you naturally react to things? Most people won't be honest to you in a Bible study. So you're going to have to pull it out of them. And one of those is like love, because almost every person, whether it's parents, spouse, dating, brother and sister, or humankind, when you get upset, you don't want to talk to somebody, even if it's for 5 minutes. And God don't treat people that way, because the Bible said when the sun come out, do it fall on who? Just good people? Everybody. Just like when the rain come out, it fall on everybody, because God judges based off of pure justice and what's fair, not the way that man judges. Last week in the adult class on Sunday morning, he said, what am I, like a man that I would lie? I'm not like you. I don't operate like you. If I said it, I'm going to do it. Even if you're mean to me, I will still be true. Doesn't Paul say that, right? If you still denounce him, he won't, because he cannot denounce himself. It's up to you. You decide. Nothing created could separate you from God's love, but you have that power to walk away. He gives you that free will. So that's kind of where that is. I only deviated from there quickly because we were touching on the second part of transformation. Okay, Sister Beulah and then Brother Dev.
It is like parents. You have your kids, regardless of what wrong they do. You know the wrong, you will chastise them for the wrongdoing, but you still love them. That is love.
Mm-hmm.
You know, love is a thing you don't just switch on and switch off. You don't. If you love somebody, that don't say that that person may not hurt you. They might hurt you, or they may do something wrong. Yes, but that don't say that you're going to stop loving them.
Mm-hmm.
Love is something you can't either say, look at me. Not a day passed that I am perfect. In the sight of God, I'm like a dirty rag. But He still loves me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the way that we should love each other. Not conditionally. If you do something good for me, I love you. And if you upset me, I don't love you. It don't work so. Love is something within. Love. God is love. Love. Love is, to me, is something very sacred, is something that we should look at and try to adopt that. Because if we have love, we wouldn't hurt anybody. You would look at that person with respect, regardless of what they do, overlook it. Because I always say, look behind the scene. Who is behind the scene? This is how God look at us. Who behind the scene? We got to love. Love is important. God is love. And if we love God, we love each other. We don't, love is not something to put on, one minute I love, the next minute I don't love you.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's why I use that as an example, because it's constant, like a lifestyle. Same with Christianity. You can't put it on and take it off. So this is kind of why I use that as an example. So good point. Yes, Brother Doug.
Definition of love is very complicated.
Yeah, it's very complicated.
Even for chapter 3, chapter 13, verses 3 says, you give everything, whatever you have.
Mm-hmm.
Even you burn your body to others.
Yes.
You still you don't have love.
It's nothing.
It's nothing.
You have nothing.
And how you love then other. How you love,
Mm-hmm.
you gotta just like kissing or hugging or
yes, that would be people's questions. Yes, how do I love? Yes.
Yeah, that's definitely it's hard. I think this all the Roman chapter 12 verses 1 and 2 is very deep. It's very to understand.
Mm-hmm.
If we look with this, it will go pulls all the verses. So many verses comes and that same book that Sister was reading, Colossians chapter 3 verses 2 and 3. I would like to read.
Say it again. Colossians what?
Colossians chapter 3 verses 2 and 3. Set your mind in things above, not on earthly things. So even we go through this, and second Timothy chapter 6 and all the back verses, it pulls out, and we feel so sorrow, guilty.
Mm-hmm.
We feel ourselves very upset and very weak at the time. And then 3 says, for you died, and your life is not hidden. Your life is now hidden with Christ in God, which means we don't walk ourselves, we walking with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So meaning whatever we do, if people who know us and they see our action, which is actually not proper as a Christ life, and they will definitely tell, who am I? evil or God. So my point is here that love can comes by action is here throughout life. What we do, what we act, how we speak, how we talk, how we behave, these all things in the God's, the action. So that's the first John or second John when we read, it tells all about Jesus Christ, how he did within 30 years he lived in physical life, although he never sin, meaning how he would live that we can imagine with those time. A friend of Nija, all the time I remember that girl always tells, the Christian go to church because they are sin. Look, you feeling how you feel that song. She said, the Christian people, they call fresh Christian and they go every Sunday or whatever, they go to church because they do every day wrong. That's why they go. We don't go there because we don't do that kind of thing. That's why we don't go. Yes, there is something understandable, some kind of thing to understand it. Yes, we understand that. Yes, we do realize some kind of there's a truth, and that's why this just the verse chapter 1, the Callin chapter 1 verses 22 and then read. It's got to understand those people who says this word, but now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you only in his sight without blameless and free from accusation, which means those people who accuse us, now we have to show how we walk, how we talk, how we behave, how we action. That's the Jesus Christ show by our life. And I think this is the life that you are teaching by Romans chapter.
Right. That's why this is so important. This, right? Because this last part of 2 is explaining, it's saying you're supposed to act this way anyway in verse 1. And it's explaining what it is. It would be the same as saying, well, you just go to work because you have bills and you don't want to be poor. Well, yeah, that's true, right? But you need to go to somewhere where you want to work, or you just marry because you don't want to be lonely. Okay, lonely is kind of bad, all right, but that's not really the reason to stay married, right? So we got to get people's mind off the negative to the positive, because it's like a baby, right? Like a baby mind can only understand so much. So you start off talking about spiritual baby is sin, you could, and then what do I do and all these things. But you can't only think you go to church because you're a sinner, because you have to grow your mind out of that, and you got to get them to say, oh, we go to church because we have a relationship with God, right? That's where it's kind of like, that's where I use Hosea as an example, because you have a relationship with her, but she already broke that vow. No, you have a relationship. See, that's why when God said, but I hate divorce, but we want to get divorced anyway. You want to do something that I already told you I hate. No one think about that, do they? You asking me to do something I've already told you I hate inside of me. Think of that. I want to do it anyway. Oh, okay, so you don't care that I hate it. No, is what people are saying. Now, that's not a big thing. What about little things that every day you say don't do, we do it anyway? Think, though. He's saying that this is the opposite of me. We want to do it anyway. Well, that's why your ways and your thoughts are not my ways and my thoughts. So Dev is right. You have to show people, because if you just show them the words, they may come to the conclusion, like I said, this sounds like work. Y'all just going somewhere because you're sick and I'm already well. Why would I go to the hospital and check myself in if I don't have a cold? What sense does that make? So all this stuff you doing throughout the week, you feel bad, you take Lord's Supper, you cry. She's saying, I don't feel that way. So I don't want to be sad. I'm already happy. I want to go somewhere else, brunch, walk in Seaside Park. Do something fun. You want me to be sad. Why would I start my week off sad? Right? That's her point there. Just like some people say, come on, man, why you want to be married? This just sounds like fighting all the time. Just go be happy. Why would you want to be angry every day? Right? Don't people say that? Why would you want to do that? Come on, man, quit that job. Why you want to be upset every day? Just be like us. Let's hang outside. Let's enjoy life. Some people say, let's travel the world. We don't got to work. See, people have their concept because they'll see what you're doing and say, let's do something else. But you have to get them to the point of, oh, you're missing the renewing part, right? You just stuck on the surface level. You missed the deep, deep meaning. You just grabbed the low-hanging fruit, but you didn't go to the top of the tree, which was the best fruit. You didn't think of it that way. That is how Bible study is, or church, really. And this summary is verse 3, because this brings us to your second point, which is about judging. Verse 3 says, for I say, through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, don't think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly. NIV says, what's the translation for sober? Sober judgment. As God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. Okay, right? Don't get all of this, verse 1 and 2. You say, oh, I'm here Wednesday to hear it. So the other 40 people, they didn't hear it. So when I get to church Sunday, I'm going to be like, wow, it feels so good to be transformed and renewed. All of you are conformed. You are square pies. Everyone say, what is that? Well, you weren't there, so you didn't hear it. You don't know what we talk about. You a square pie. God say, no. Don't go telling people square pies, because don't think more highly than you should, because God is the one dealing out faith. Now, faith come by what? Hearing, and hearing by the word of God. If you don't hear, you don't have faith. See? So if you don't study enough, you don't have enough faith. See? If you only come Sunday or once a while, you're never going to have faith as somebody who, let's say they go to a Bible study 7 days a week. Impossible. You only go to the gym once a month and somebody went 30 days. The two of you no way going to look the same. See? So God is saying you can't think highly than you are, because you only have what you have because of you were doing what you were doing. It's not like you were born with that. See? Right? You can't really be like walking around showing your six-pack and be like, aha, I got a six-pack, you got a pot belly, because it's just you put in the work. Not like you were bored with that and you say, I can eat whatever I want to eat and I never have to work out and look. Right? It don't work that way. You only have that because you put the work in. That's what he's saying. You can't put work in and then look back and be like, aha, nana, boo-boo, because God's going to say, but you only have what you have because I'm the one who's giving out faith. If you never hear, you never would have had faith. Not like you just was born and you came out of the womb teaching and preaching and the doctors was like, look, this baby's saying we should be baptized. It don't work that way. But we sometimes feel ourselves more high than what we should. And that's that same way. When we see people that are talking, maybe saying, to Aaron's point Sunday, calling pastor or using wrong terminology, or saying you go to church for the wrong reason, you got to be gentle with them, right? Because they're babies. They don't know. You have to show them. You can't be like, well, because I'm already here, then chastise you. Because when you do that spiritually, people don't care anything you say. That's why I say all the time, especially Christians nowadays with online. Why would I sit up arguing with somebody's spiritual things? Those two things don't work in a sense. Oh, what was you doing yesterday? Well, I was arguing about Bible. How? Why were you? What were you arguing about? I can only tell you if you don't want to believe, that's on you. Why would I argue with you? I got upset. Why would I get upset someone else choosing where they're going to go? I'm not going there. I don't get upset to you. I'm not going to hell. I'm going to do everything I can not go there. Well, I was upset because they want to go there. Well, I mean, it don't work that way. When I'm sitting in the patient room in the doctor, somebody come out crying with bad news. Do I have that illness? Because they have that? Does the doctor say, oh, everyone has this? And you thinking, I didn't even be seen yet. How you know I have that? Because everyone in here have this bad thing. It don't work that way. You have your own life choices. Sometimes, even if it's, to Beulah's point, your children, they have their own life choices. Get it that way. So we have to make sure that we're doing it the way Christ would, which is in love. Remember, Nicodemus came to him. He wasn't mean to him. He just asked him, how are you a teacher of these people and you don't know these things? If you don't know how wind work, how you asking me how you be born again? That's the same way as you have to leave people wanting to hear more instead of chastising. They don't know. So don't be mean to them. Just show them the renewing of your mind, because that is powerful and very visible. When you live different and every time somebody see you, you becoming better, it is encouraging, right? When you haven't been, I use gym because it's visibly transforming. You haven't seen somebody in a while. And then you go, you don't have to ask them, hey, how you lost all that weight? That is a silly question because you know that person have been dieting and working out. I don't need to ask somebody, whoa, you used to be 500 pounds. How you lost all that weight? Per se, what do you mean? I lost weight. I went out a diet and I worked out. Even if I had a surgery, I still had to keep the weight off. Don't ask that. But we be so excited. We ask it, oh, how you have that? We see somebody, how you have all that money? Oh, I have 3 jobs. Well, I'm not trying to work those 3 jobs. Okay, so then you ain't trying to have all that money. That's how life works. You put in work, you get results. Man, how y'all got a good marriage? How you got good kids? How y'all got a good, happy, loving church? Why people ask those kind of questions? Because we looking at the end. We don't want to look at the path to put into the work. That's how people on the outside, people are going to say, why are you always going to church? Because from the outside, they don't understand, right? You have to help them understand this renewing part because it does look weird to them. They're going to say, why would you every week go to church? Why? They don't understand it. You got to help them. That's what these verses are saying, that if you do this and you change from the world and change to where God is, you'll prove to people what salvation is. And this is how people should be living anyway. Verse 1, this is the reasonable and acceptable service, right? Living sacrifice, right? You go to Ecclesiastes, the last verse, the meaning of life. That's what this is saying. David, you have something?
Well, it's very fitting the example of the gym because we're about to go to the gym.
Yeah, see?
I understand that in such a good way because it's easy in a temporary way to eat and not go to the gym because it's so immediately gratifying. Mm-hmm. It's so easy not to go to church and sleep in. I had that temptation today, don't get me wrong, to either come here or sleep in because I came from work. I was like, I should try to sleep in. It's such a hot day. It's easy to do that.
Yep.
And the gym is not even not a fitting analogy in a sense because it makes you live longer, but you're still going to die.
Yes, even like Paul said, only profit you a little bit.
But I like the words in 1 John, where in John 1, chapter 2, verse 15, where it says, do not love the world, or the things in the world, but then you love the world, you love the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it, but he who does the will of God abides forever. So the idea of that, it's not, there's one aspect to it that you are in better health when you have a fit body. That's one aspect. And you have a better life in this world when you are living in, with that kind of attitude. But even more than that, there's something much beyond that you cannot comprehend.
Yes.
I think that is something that people fail to see. And to speak of Dad's point, somebody saying like, why do you go? It's not just about today. It's not just about me feeling bad about the week I had. It's also about me living to something that is beyond myself. That's the transformation. That's me thinking beyond the physical and what my body is going to be after it turns to dust and dirt.
Yep, this is a good point, right? So let's close here with this concept. Think of smoking, right? Truth commercials. They show you bad lungs or people talking through their throat. So they show you here is the results of a life of smoking. So they're trying to say if you keep smoking, this will happen. Right? Same way you go to the doctor, they show you what a bad heart look like, a bad liver. You say, oh, that's inside of me. Yes. And it scares you and you go home, throw out all fat, sugar, and you live different. So when people have this question, let's look at Christians who are weaker first, and then we'll close with visitors or friends, like to Dev's point, right? People who are weaker, right? We all know family members, people we sit next to when we're in the other room. We know they're not as strong as they need to be. You have to ask them, where do they see themselves even in 10 years? Because what people do now, even in 10 years, they won't want to do. Even the sin. Even the sin you doing right now that kept you from church. If 10 years I say, let's do this same thing, you say, nah, that's corny, that's boring. I don't like that thing no more. So people grow out, right? So you have to ask them, where do you see your life? Because when people about to fall away, they want to blame everyone else. You have to get them to look at themselves. Where do you see yourself? You asking me about me. I'm asking you about you, because I'm me. I'm not leaving. You about to leave. Where do you see your life? And that, like that truth commercial is, oh, you mean my lungs look like that? It's well, this person talking through the neck. I feel bad for them, but I'm not talking through my neck. No, you're going to end up like that. Oh, you didn't tell me that, right? That's how people are. Now, for people who aren't even saved, you go to that same concept, right? Because it's, where do you see yourself? Where will you be? That's where you should leave people. Let's say you don't go. I'm going to keep going. You don't want to go. I'm going to be baptized. You don't want to be baptized. Where are you going to be when you die? I don't know. Okay, I can't live off I don't know. What do you mean? Because I want to be somewhere good. I can't be out here living off I don't knows. Right? I don't just go to the grocery store blindly and just put the stuff in the carriage. I don't pray over my food and just eat. I need the lights on. I want to see what I'm putting in my body, right? And my body is physical. It's going to die anyway. So I'm even more concerned with my soul. But people not thinking about their soul, they're thinking about Sunday. So Dev's point is that lady not thinking about soul. She thinking about why you going. I'm talking about Sunday, like July, whatever that date is. You telling me about future time. You got to get her mind off of dates and say there will be a time where there'll be no date. Then where will you be? See? But you have to get people to look at it for themselves. Just telling them not enough, right? Just the doctor telling you not enough. It's when they tell you you're going to end up like this. That's when you go home sad. That's how we have to be. And I think sometimes we miss that in our Bible studies, where our advice to Christians is we kind of badger them. Don't badger them. Just ask them for themselves. Where do you see yourself? Let's say everyone is wrong and you're right. We're going to follow you. Where should we go? Right? Ask them that. Where should we go? Let's stop going. Let's go somewhere else. What should we do? Then what you talking about? What do you mean? We about to stop. What should we do? Okay, well, you go to church because you think you're a sinner. Great. I'm not going to go. Sunday, I'm going to hang out with you. What are we going to do? Okay, and next week. 10 years. I don't know. Well, you don't got no plan for me then. You want me to stop going? I like going there. You want me to stop going where I like, to hang out with you, and you don't have a plan for yourself or even me. But we know they don't have a plan, but we need to show them they don't have a plan. Get my point? So you got to help them to see themselves. That's difficult. I'm not saying, okay, that's the easiest thing in the world, but that is the best way I see to end a study. Because end it with them thinking about them. Don't end it with them mad at you. Because you got to tell them, I'm just a regular person. I'm not putting anything to you to what to do. A doctor is saying, I just studied this. I'm not a miracle worker. I'm just telling you that if you keep doing this, you are going to end up there. The doctor telling you, I'm not ending up there because I don't eat what you eat or smoke or do drugs or whatever you're doing. I'm telling you from somebody who don't do those things. That's how we have to give advice. Because people will digest it better if they're thinking about themselves. If they're thinking about you, then they're going to feel like you feel you're better than them. That's how people feel. When church people talk to them, they think, oh, y'all think y'all better than me, so I don't want to hear what you're saying. You got to ask them, where are you going? And sometimes that's the study. Where are you going? I don't know. Okay, well, I'll talk to you later. Where are you going? You don't know where you're going. What you want to study? See, people want to sit up talking, all this talking. Where are you going? Let's go somewhere. Let's go. Where you want to go? I don't know. Well, then, you don't got no way for me. You might as well follow the way I'm doing because you don't have a way. That's how we have to look at it, is confuse people. in their own life confuse them. Where are you going? Let's go where you're going. I don't know where I'm going. Right. You sitting here arguing me when I know where I'm going. Isn't that what Jesus did? He told them in John, you keep telling me you from this place. I know where I'm from. Y'all don't know where you're from. And they got so confused, they picked up rocks, remember, and they wanted to stone him because he kept confusing them. Remember, they said, our Father, we know who it is. He said, your father is the devil. No, our father is God. Then they said, no, our father is Abraham. You don't know who your father is. And they got so frustrated, they wanted to kill him. See, that's how it is, because people get confused because they don't know even what they believe. Use that same technique. Is most effective, I see, with family or church members, because we know we're not all strong. But instead of saying, why you didn't go to Bible study? You missed a great lesson. Just say, ask them some questions for themselves and let them ponder. And maybe a month, 2 years later, they come back to you and say, you know what? You're right. I got to do better. But they have to believe that themselves. So this is one of those studies of either you talking to yourself or to others. Maybe we change our, not approach, but sometimes wording, right? We saying the same things, but maybe wording is a little bit different. Try to push it on people. Try to ask them where they're going, how they see it. Do they have an answer, a way? Try to make them look at themselves, because these two verses, that's what it kept doing. See, it kept bringing us back inward so that we would say, oh, we need to live better. We know God wants us to live better, but we need to live better. Okay, let's end there.